I'm Mark Golub, and in the news, a bit of a firestorm in the Jewish community over the decision made by one of the major Jewish newspapers in America to run a paid advertisement in support of a Palestinian terrorist murderer currently serving 5 consecutive life sentences in an Israeli prison. The Jewish Forward decided to publish an ad from Marwan Barghouti, who murdered 5 people in Tel Aviv, including a Greek Orthodox priest, and who had attempted a suicide bombing of Jerusalem's most popular indoor mall. Before his capture in Ramallah in 2002, Barghouti was the leader of a terrorist arm of Fatah and was one of those who had organized the Second Intifada. The ad published by the Jewish Forward was produced by an organization called Jewish Voice for Peace, or JVP, which is described by the Anti-Defamation League as the largest Jewish anti-Zionist group in the United States. The ad is made up of Barghouti's own words, protesting the way Palestinians are treated in Israeli jails, and claims that Israel has no legal right to arrest Palestinian freedom fighters, and features a drawing over the caption, "Palestine will be free." The publisher of the Forward, Rachel Federson, explained that the paper debated accepting the ad, but in the end, despite their reservations, decided to publish the ad because, quote, mass media itself is on the firing line, and freedom of expression is under pressure from our own government, unquote. And there are real philosophical issues raised by the JVPs coming to the Forward seeking to purchase space in their paper to place their ad. To what extent does this raise issues of free speech, even hate speech, which is protected by our Constitution? Does a Jewish media organization, print, radio, and television, have the right to refuse to run an ad, the content of which they may disagree with? If the Forward had rejected the Barghouti ad, would it be violating some kind of free speech principle which has been so vital to Jewish interests and has served the Jewish community very well here in America? Well, many of the most highly respected journalists on the American Jewish scene have weighed in on the discussion, and many question the appropriateness of the Forward's choosing to accept the paid ad. These journalists include Rob Eshman, publisher and editor-in-chief of the Jewish Journal of Greater Los Angeles; Jackie Hedepol, managing editor of the Detroit Jewish News; David Portnow, editor of the New Jersey Jewish Community Voice; and Sue Fishkoff, editor of the Jewish News of Northern California. And one of the most severe critics of the Forward's decision, calling it disgraceful, is Dovid Efune, editor-in-chief of the Algemeiner. And Dovid joins us on our JBS phones now from Brighton to explain his objections to the Forward's publishing the ad produced by the Jewish Voice for Peace. Dovid, thank you so much again for joining us.
It was a pleasure, Mark.
First, Dovid, I want our audience to know we invited Rachel Federson, who just became publisher of the Forward this month, to participate in the program. We were told her schedule was booked up for today. We also asked if we could speak with any other member of the Forward staff, but our producer, Carol Lilienthal, was told they would love to be part of the discussion, but they needed more time to prepare a response. So I'm sorry we do not have anyone to speak on behalf of the Forward. But the issue of how the Jewish media, including JBS, deals with individuals and groups who support the Palestinian cause to one degree or another is an issue that transcends this particular ad in the Forward. So, Dovid, I begin by asking you to explain, why are you so adamant in your criticism of the Forward's decision? Again, you characterized it as disgraceful.
Well, I think the first thing that people need to understand, or that's necessary to understand, and I think, to me it's obvious, and I think it should be obvious to most, is who is Marwan Barghouti, that this ad was looking to support and really whitewash, certainly ignore his crime. And I think that's where the issue of morality plays in over here. Marwan Barghouti was convicted in an Israeli court of taking the first right, the right to life, from 5 innocent Israelis. Now, that conviction is widely understood to have been the easiest conviction for the prosecution to go for. But really, he's considered one of the architects of the Second Intifada. Now, the Second Intifada, let me take you back a little bit. I mean, that's for the likes of the Sbarro Pizzeria bombing, the Dolphinarium discotheque bombings, which young, innocent people, teenagers' lives were taken from them. This resulted in the deaths of over 1,000 Israelis. This was the Seder night suicide bombing, and Marwan Barghouti played, by all accounts, certainly by the Israeli security accounts, a very central role in probably the greatest loss of innocent Jewish life, of civilian Jewish life, since the Holocaust. So for a Jewish newspaper to allow themselves to become a platform for the whitewashing of those crimes, it's more than disgraceful. It's more than despicable. It is a gross abdication of moral judgment. And to pin that on some sort of freedom of expression explanation represents a real misunderstanding of what that expression is supposed to mean. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that private individuals and private institutions don't have a right and a responsibility to make moral judgments about what they are willing to provide a platform for and what they are not willing to provide a platform for. Regardless of what the Constitution guarantees as a right by the government is different to the moral responsibilities of individuals and institutions.
Dovid, Rachel Fishman-Feddersen, again, she's the publisher of the Forward, justified the paper's decision to publish the ad by linking it to what many in the Jewish community are claiming is an assault on the freedom of the press by Donald Trump. Again, Feddersen's comment, I want to put it up on the screen again, says, mass media itself is on the firing line, and freedom of expression is under pressure from our own government. David, how do you respond to the Forward's putting their decision in the context of this larger American media issue that claims that Donald Trump wants to limit freedom of the press?
So even if you are one who's going to accept that narrative, that Donald Trump actually is looking to limit freedom of expression as opposed to fight back against the media that's being, in his view, overly critical and unfair. But even if you are to accept that narrative, what you're saying is that 2 wrongs make a right. And we all know that 2 wrongs do not make a right. Marwan Barghouti and Jewish Voice for Peace both have a history of taking away the voices of others. And that's exactly what they represent, taking away the lives, certainly in the case of Marwan Barghouti. And Jewish Voice for Peace is one of the most aggressive and belligerent groups, which is active in shutting down Torah voices, certainly on campuses throughout the United States. They're a group that provided a platform for Mayor Odeh, who was also convicted for her involvement in the killing of 2 other innocent Israelis. Jewish Voice for Peace is a hate group. So even if you're going to take the position that Donald Trump is impacting negatively the freedom of expression in this country, to then go ahead and promote other groups that have a proven and aggressive history in shutting down the lives and the voices of so many innocents, is trying to make the case that 2 wrongs somehow make a right. Mm-hmm. That's obviously not the case. Mm-hmm. It's disgraceful.
Mm-hmm. David, Robert Cohn, who is the former editor of the St. Louis Jewish Light, he's the current co-chair of the American Jewish Press Association's Committee on Ethics and Professional Standards, said he would not censure any publisher who accepted such an ad, but he did say he would not accept an ad from someone like David Duke of the KKK. David, do you feel it's a valid distinction to draw a line between David Duke on the one hand and Marwan Barghouti on the other?
Well, to me, frankly, Marwan Barghouti is a heck of a lot worse than David Duke and everything that David Duke represents. Because Marwan Barghouti is a convicted killer. Let's not forget that. He's a convicted killer of 5 innocents. I don't know how many times one can stress it. Not only is he a convicted killer, he's widely believed to be responsible for orchestrating the death of more than 1,000 innocent Israelis, for his involvement in orchestrating the Second Intifada. So, to me, I would sooner publish David Duke than Marwan Barghouti, even though I probably would not publish either. But to say that David Duke is somehow beyond the pale and the support for Marwan Barghouti is not beyond the pale, that's outrageous to me.
Okay. David, talk to me about now the even broader divide the Forward's decision to publish this ad reflects. There are those in the American Jewish community who sympathize with Marwan Barghouti, see him as a Nelson Mandela, and see him as a freedom fighter, not as a terrorist. And I'm curious to hear your response in general to that view that you and I do come across in the Jewish community.
Look, it's hard for me to understand how anybody could conceivably make that claim. I mean, Marwan Barghouti has remained unrepentant. He refused to even defend himself at his trial. He is somebody who again, convicted of murder and a role in the murder of many, many more people. I mean, these are not the crimes that Nelson Mandela was ever accused of. And yes, he wasn't involved and accused of fomenting violence in the early days of his career. But he subsequently made an effort to reform himself, and he became a very vocal advocate for peace and peaceful means. And that's certainly not the case with Barghouti. I mean, he's a militant to the end, and even if he were to express the most intense remorse for the acts that he's committed, there might be a case to be made that anybody can be absolved. You know, I've even heard people forgive the Nazis. Not something that I would do, and it's not something that I agree with. But if regret is sincere, it doesn't mean that justice must not be done. But it's possible to say that somebody might find room for absolution in their heart. Obviously,
understand.
That's not something that you and I could do, or any member of the public. It's something that only the victim can speak to, and it's a very personal decision. But this is not the case here. It's not even close to the case.
Mm-hmm.
There's not even any sort of expectation or consideration that this might be the case. This is an unrepentant killer who would kill again if he had the opportunity, with glee, with a smile on his face.
Yes. By the way, I think you said very well. My question is, why do you think it is that there is at the moment a segment of the American Jewish community which is sympathetic to the Palestinian cause? But I can understand being sympathetic to the Palestinian cause, but to be sympathetic to Marwan Barghouti and to make of him, again, a freedom fighter rather than the terrorist you paint him to be, which I believe is just, absolute fact. My question for you is, as you look at the Jewish community today, Dovid, what do you think is driving that element inside the American Jewish people?
That's a very good question, and the truth is it might be better suited for a psychologist than an editor. Even though I've heard that sometimes editors can be compared to psychologists. The truth is, I don't have an answer. I mean, it's absurd to me. It's an evolution that is deeply, deeply troubling. What we're seeing is a devolution of simple moral concepts, moral principles. Mm-hmm. It's almost as if these great crimes are to be overlooked, are to be forgiven in place of a certain political agenda, which doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
It's sad, it's shocking, it's a blatant abdication of moral principles and moral justice, and it's a great stain on our community, the way that I see it.
Mm-hmm. Dovid, you also have spoken about the financial aspect of this entire story. I want the audience to understand this was a paid ad that was placed in the forward. They came to the forward and they said, we want to buy space. As far as the Algemeiner is concerned, if someone comes to you and says, I want to give the Algemeiner money, and I believe you take money to run all kinds of ads, you should take money to run mine, whether it's in a hard copy newspaper, whether it's on an online media homepage, whether it's on JBS television. If you have to make that decision for any organization you're with, and somebody says to you, Dovid, I'm going to pay you money, you take money from other people, you should take money from me, what do you say, and to what extent do you feel that played into the forward's decision?
Look, I can't say to what extent it played into their decision because I'm not aware of the details of their finances. But to me, it would be it wouldn't even be a question. I mentioned this in my initial statement, that there is no amount of money that would compel us to take an ad like this. Ultimately, the money goes towards the newspaper. The newspaper represents something. Every newspaper needs to have a soul. It needs to represent a voice. It needs to stand for something and fight for something. What good is the money if there is no moral compass? To me, it's an absolute no-brainer. The ethics, the morality, what's right and what's wrong has to come above everything, and I think that's the basic moral duty and responsibility of any public platform, any Jewish newspaper, certainly, which has an additional responsibility, I think, to put ethics and morals above all else in terms of these types of decisions.
Look, we don't have someone from the forward here in the discussion. And these are people I know. I have enormous regard for many of the people at the forward, whom I know personally and I'm very fond of. And we have J.J. Goldberg on all the time. Jane Eisner is doing a fabulous job, has done a fabulous job. At the same time, the forward has a very left-leaning bias. And I would imagine that if someone were here joining our discussion of it, they would try to say to you, of course we understand that Barghouti is a monster. Our problem is that there is a principle here that we felt was important to also stand up for, they would say. And the principle is made all the more important given the climate that Donald Trump has created. And that therefore, while we agree with Dovid when it comes to the evil that Barghouti represents, there is some other principle that the forward is committed to, and it's in that context we made a very difficult decision, but the decision was to sell the space and run the ad. If that were their argument, Dovid, what would you respond?
Well, I think it's as we've discussed in the past, it's an unfortunate decision to make because most papers, I think all papers, as you mentioned with the example of David Efune, do have some boundary in terms of what they will or won't allow in their feed. The question is, where is the line drawn? And I imagine that there is a line that the forward will make at some point. I think every publication will make that line at some point. The question is, why wasn't this on the other side of the line? It seems to me to be very obvious that this is an issue that should be clearly placed on the other side of the line. Again, there is, I think, often a misunderstanding of what the principle of freedom of expression means. It's one of the most beautiful concepts of American society, certainly of the Constitution, that every person is protected by the government to say what they want, to speak their own voice and their own thoughts and their own perspectives, however offensive that may be, to others. Having said that, there are, for private institutions, institutions to provide a platform for that speech is not necessarily something that needs to be guaranteed. The private institutions are able to make their own decisions, and each one can draw conclusions and arrive at their own decisions in terms of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And I think for a Jewish publication, a publication that speaks in behalf of the Jewish community, and I will share that with you, but I have a lot of respect for the individual at the forward. And I'm sure that this is not a decision that was made by everybody. It was made by certain individuals. I wouldn't be surprised if there were some individuals within the publication that disagreed with it, but it wasn't their decision to make. I think they're a newspaper that has exceptional quality in terms of writing, in terms of journalism, and I have tremendous respect for many of the individuals there. To me, it's a great shame, and it's very sad that this was not an obvious choice for anybody presented with this decision in any position of public responsibility.
Dovid, it is always wonderful to have your opinion here on JBS. You continue to do a fabulous job with the Algemeiner. I hope everybody who's watching JBS reads the Algemeiner. You break wonderful stories, and it's always good for me to talk to you. I hope we can talk many times, and we're trying to get together in studio. I look forward to that as well. But right now, thank you so much for making time for me here on JBS.
Anytime, Mark.
Thank you, Dovid. Dovid Efune, editor-in-chief of the Algemeiner. For me, again, this is not a theoretical or hypothetical issue. This is a real issue, and an important one for any news organization. Where does one draw the line on freedom of speech? You're not allowed to yell fire in a crowded theater when there is no fire. From time to time, we have to make decisions here about what stories we will feature on JBS, which we will not. And if you watch JBS, you'll see both the left and the right expressing their opinion. You'll see Mort Klein of the ZOA. You'll see Jeremy Ben-Ami of J Street. You'll see Alan Dershowitz and Brett Stevens. You'll see Peter Beinart and Dan Kurtzer. You'll see Helen Friedman and Eric Yaffe. You'll see Jane Eisner and Ken Bobb and Steve Gutto. And you'll see Charles Small and Mordechai Kedar and Thane Rosenbaum. Oh, as a footnote, it's always so interesting to me that those on the left tend to paint JBS as being on the right, while those on the right paint JBS as being on the left. Differing views are reflected on JBS. But there's a line here at JBS. That line is the legitimacy of the State of Israel and its unequivocal right to exist as the Jewish state of the Jewish people. JBS will never take an ad that advocates the destruction of the State of Israel. There is no obligation or principle that requires Jews to self-destruct. And as open as JBS is, I make no apologies for my stand that the Jewish people and the State of Israel have as much integrity as any other people or nation state in this world. And I feel absolutely no obligation to take a paid ad from a group dedicated to the destruction of the State of Israel. That goes beyond free speech, even hate speech. That speech that the Jewish community would not tolerate if spoken about any other group, including the Palestinian people. And it's so obvious. It's so axiomatic. It's so essential to what it means to be part of the Jewish world that it seems ludicrous that I or Dovid Efune or any other editor or publisher in the Jewish world would need to make this argument. Of course, a Jewish media source should never take an ad from any group that seeks to destroy the State of Israel. So from my perspective, the Jewish Forward, again, I have enormous regard for the people at Jewish Forward. You see them all the time here on JBS. You hear them here. But from my perspective, the Jewish Forward made a mistake by taking a paid ad from any group supporting Marwan Barghouti, who believes he is totally justified in murdering Israeli civilians, and he's part of a Palestinian leadership that wants from the river to the sea without a Jewish state of Israel. For the sake of a general principle that the Forward obviously believes in, they were willing to give Marwan Barghouti a platform to broadcast his malevolence and his lies about the state of Israel. It was a mistake. Those are my views. I'd love to hear yours. Please email me at rabbigolub@jbstv.org. I would love to hear from you. As always, my thanks to our director, Sloan Copeland, JBS's Associate Director, Dara Golub, editors Dennis Golan and John McDevitt, and to the producer of In the News, Carol Lilienthal. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.